Hi, and welcome to this video, which is how to get good at fewest moves. I know this is a series of how to get fast in an event, but clearly that needs to be a little bit adapted for this. So it's how to get good at fewest moves, as in how to not take very many moves in fewest moves. Right, now I average something sub 30, maybe 28 or 29. I've been around there for a few years. Yeah, so you know I'm a decent solver. I've got like 3 26s officially, and obviously a whole bunch of other sub 30s. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is hardware. Now this event is a little different. You're not just going to use one puzzle or whatever. So what you need for fewest moves, well, at the very minimum, you're going to need one 3x3. But you are allowed to use up to three cubes during your attempt. Now you don't need to use all three, but personally I find that very helpful, so that I can trace back some moves if I want to keep a position, or if I want to apply the inverse scramble to one of them or something, but we'll go on to that later. You also need something to write your solution down. In competition, a pen, but when I'm at home I just use Notepad on my computer. And obviously if you've got a pen, you're going to need a load of paper. Right, so that's what you need. As for what cube you use any cube, it doesn't matter. You could use a Rubik's brand and you'd probably get the same result. Yeah, obviously the faster you solve it, the faster you scramble on it, you're going to have more time to find a good solution. So it's worth using your main cube, but it's not going to be a big difference. Now let's move on to methods. Fewest moves is again different from the other events in that it's all about being flexible. People don't limit themselves to one method. So when I'm giving you advice on what methods to learn to be good at fewest moves, I can't really. I can just tell you which sort of techniques to apply during your solves. You can have a general approach, but you shouldn't be sticking to one method only. This video is not just about how to get sub 30. I'm going to start from the perspective of someone who has never really done fewest moves before. So the obvious way to get started is to do a normal solve with your normal speed solving methods. So if you use CFOP, this will result in a solution of around 60 moves probably. With RU, it's a little bit more efficient, but the M turns obviously add 2 moves at a time. So let's move on to how to average stuff. So we'll start at sub 60. I think sub 60 is a very silly aim, because sub 50 average should be perfectly achievable by everyone who knows a full method such as CFOP. So to get sub 60, just think a little bit during your standard speed solve. If you're using CFOP, try solving the F12 pairs in a different order or a different way to find short F12 solutions. Try this loads and loads of times, and maybe you can get lucky and find an OLL or a PLL skip, and then sub 60 should be very, very easy. Especially given the whole event, you have an hour to do this event if you want. So yeah, just aim higher than sub 60 to start with. So sub 50. I don't think this should be too difficult for everybody either. Just keep you can probably just keep spamming speed solving solutions. You can try starting on different colours. If you're doing a cross, just start on any cross colour. Obviously it's going to be a little harder to recognise pairs and whatever, but you've got an hour, so who cares how slow you are. You could try building an X cross. Yeah, keep trying F12s until you get skips and stuff. But yeah, as I said, sub 50 isn't anything special either. Fewest moves only gets interesting when you're going for sub 40 or better than that. So sub 40. this is where you can really start to learn things that are specialist for Fewest moves. Once you average sub 40, I'd call you probably like a decent solver. Yeah, let's see, you're decent if you average sub 40. I think it's possible to average sub 40 just with normal speed solving algorithms, CFOP algorithms, and just spamming so many solutions that you always get a little bit lucky, and you might be able to average sub 40 like this. But I think if sub 40 average is your aim, you should start learning some different approaches that the top solvers use. So the most widely used approach is based around block building. So you can start by trying to build a 2x2x2 block and extend to a 3x2x2x2. Let me say that again. Start by trying to build a 2x2x2 block and extend to a 2x2x3. That's a pretty efficient way of building like a double X cross or something, rather than making a cross than two pairs, which is very inefficient. Another approach is corners first, although I only know of 2 people who have really explored this. Although they're extremely good solvers, there is very little documentation on it, if any, so I wouldn't really advise pursuing that. Back to block building, the most basic approach is to make a 2x2x2. So let me just grab a key. Okay, so for a 2x2x2, I'm going to build this block here. Sorry if you can't tell the difference between yellow and white very well. This one's white, this one's white, and this one's white. Yeah, the other pieces here. So I can build this 2x2x2x2 without one of those twos, because that would be 4-dimensional. Then a common continuation would be to extend to a 2x2x3. So you have a choice of this square to add onto it, or this square, or this square. And I'm going to add on this square here, because the pieces are here, here, and here. So I can do that with these moves. Then a common way to proceed would be to make F12 minus 1. So that's just making another square basically. Now we still have a choice here. We can continue building like a red F12, or we could continue building a white F12. So you can look at all the possibilities. So I'm going to make this block for the red F12, put these 3 pieces together, because there's a pretty efficient solution for that, like this, and put those in. So as you can see, that wasn't like a standard F12 at all. None of the moves I've been doing resemble a CFOP F12 insertion or anything. This is why it's so much more efficient when you don't put the cross there, because then you don't restrict your moves, the type of moves you can do, and you can just block build a lot easier. So I'm not going to bother finishing this, but yeah, that sort of block building approach is what you need to learn. And then sub 40 should be well within your grasp. But to finish, you also need to learn how to finish the solve. So from this sort of position, from F12 minus 1, your options are really extensive. The worst thing you can do is just insert the last pair like a normal F12 pair, and then do an OL and then a PLL, because that is ludicrously inefficient. Do not do this, because you won't be able to average, well, maybe you can average sub 40, but you're not going to get, it's just silly to do it. You need to learn what's called insertions. So that means solving most of the pieces and just leaving a few pieces, and then inserting a commutator somewhere earlier in the solution, which cycles those pieces round into the right position. And by doing that, you can often cancel moves from earlier in the solution. So you need to learn insertions. And to get a sub 40 average, you probably just need to learn how to do a basic corner insertion, because then you can aim towards getting all the edges solved and just leaving 3 corners. to insert somewhere in your solution. You should also learn how to use the inverse scramble. I've heard some people with the misconception that using the inverse scramble is cheating or whatever, but it absolutely is not. It's completely legal under the regulations, and it does not help you in the way that people who don't understand it think it helps you. You're not just simply undoing the scramble. That's not what you're doing. You're just solving a related scramble and then adapting that so that actually it solves the scramble that's actually placed in front of you. So you're still providing a valid solution for the scramble in front of you, you're just using a different approach. So the inverse scramble. You can learn Fewest moves techniques like these either there's the FMC thread on the speed solving forum. There's so many pages and so many good posts in that thread. Or you can read the speed solving Wikipedia pages. There's also a few video tutorials that Ranzha made in season 4 of Cubing World, so you can learn them from there. And with these approaches and techniques, you should be able to get a sub 40 average, and then people will start to consider you a decent Fewest move solver. Right, now the exciting part, which is trying to get sub 30 for Fewest moves. Average, not just one solve. Anyone can get super lucky and get sub 30 singles easily. But to actually consistently get sub 30, there are a few more things to learn. So firstly, to become a great solver, you're going to have this one thing above all, and that is patience. This event is an hour long. You're not going to be able to find a sub 30 solution in the first 5 or 10 minutes every time. Occasionally you might stumble across a really easy one straight away, but most of the time you're going to have to be working hard, using your brain for most of the hour. You need to learn to be patient, try every possibility you can possibly think of. In the end, Fewest Moves is an event where you kind of make your own luck by trying the right things. So obviously when you come across an easy solution, some of it is luck, yes, but that's happened because you've tried so many things that you're pretty likely to get a lucky stage or something. So if you don't try enough things, then you're not going to get good solves. So be patient. Another thing I haven't mentioned yet is the concept of edge orientation. So if you don't know what that means, then you should look that up. If you orient edges during the solve, you'll find it easier to build, to find good blocks. And it's important if you're trying to solve all the edges towards the end, so you can leave a corner insertion. Another technique you should have is called NISS. That's N-I-S-S. It stands for Normal Inverse Scramble Switch. And this is basically an extension to just being able to use the inverse scramble. It involves using the inverse scramble and the normal scramble in the same solve and sort of switching halfway. Don't get me wrong, it's still, your final solution will still solve the normal scramble that's placed in front of you, but to help you along the way, you're sometimes using the inverse scramble just to get a different view on the cube, basically. Also linked to that is pseudo blocks. So after you've built the 2x2x2, then instead of just extending to these blocks, if you see a different block that's really easy to build, so for example this one, I just took 3 moves to make another square, then it might be worth just making this block. But now you're like, oh, this isn't very good, it doesn't attach. So this is what pseudo blocks is. You place it here, and then you can do a little funky thing just before you scramble called the pre-move, and that helps you to see the cube with this whole block properly solved, and then you kind of just do an extra move right at the end to correct all these pieces. That's what pseudo blocks is. You should learn to use those, very useful. Once you've built to F12-1 or thereabouts, you need to try like 100, 1,000 ways of finishing your skeleton. Skeleton, I don't think I've explained what that is. It just means to solve most of the pieces and kind of just leave yourself with a few pieces for an insertion or two. The most common skeleton to make is to solve everything except 3 corners, and then you can do 1 corner insertion to solve everything. But from F12-1 this can be achieved in a lot of different ways. You could finish F12 and then solve edges and a corner of the last layer with 1 more alg, or you could try some VH F12 or LPELL or Heiss. Yeah, there's just so many ways. You just need to investigate and try them all within your solve. As I said, patience is just a massive part of Fewest moves. Once you have your skeleton, that's not the end of the solve. You still need to be able to insert commutators or maybe even other algs such as 2 corners and 2 edges. And to be sub 30 consistently, you should become an expert at insertions. So after you've learnt the basic 3 corner insertion, you should learn how to insert 2 commutators into a skeleton in order to solve 4 or 5 corners, or even 2 or 3 twisted corners. I think I've covered most of the ideas that I use very briefly, so I'll finish by talking about how to practice. In my experience, practice isn't as important in Fewest moves as in other events. Once I'd learnt the techniques I've mentioned, I was averaging in the low 30s straight away, and I've probably only averaged 1 attempt a week or less for the last few years. Of course, more practice will make you better, but what I'm saying is that you can still get very good without too much practice. Practice should consist of some attempts, but the other important thing to do is to study other people's solutions. If you look through the speed solving thread, the Fewest moves thread, you'll find hundreds of good solutions, and by going through their solutions with a cube in front of you, you can learn a lot. Just a few last tips. You should probably, once you learnt to do insertions, try buying some really little stickers to help you with those. So you can write numbers 1, 2 and 3 so you know which stickers you're trying to cycle through your solve. Another one is to solve without rotations, so that each colour face is always a specific letter. It will dramatically increase your chances of getting a solve written down properly. It will help you while you're writing it down as well to not have to worry about rotations. Yeah, so I'll finish by saying be patient and be flexible. Those are the 2 big things in Fewest moves. Never restrict yourself to thinking that you must solve these pieces next. You must do this step next. No. Be flexible and be patient. Hope this helps, and thanks for watching.